Revenge with Karen.
I read the message twice, thinking maybe I was hallucinating from too many budget reviews and not enough caffeine. But no, there it was, glowing like a middle finger in 14-point Arial bold. No one's coming to your board meeting, grow up. Sent by Tyler, our walking Red Bull of a CEO who married into the job and couldn't read a balance sheet without getting a nosebleed. It was 7:38 a.m. on my 10-year anniversary at Orion Logistics Tech. A decade of cleaning up compliance disasters, chasing missing invoices, surviving 3 acquisitions, and rebuilding the entire financial backend after our CFO fled to Panama. No cake, no card, just a Slack ping that may as well have said, "We don't need you, boomer," and that board meeting. It had been scheduled for 3 months. It wasn't just another check-in. It was the final ratification for the Series C fund disbursement, the $30 million that Tyler had been pre-spending in his head on golf partnerships and influencer retreats. And I was the one holding the switch. I stared at that text for a beat, then cracked my knuckles like I was about to perform a piano solo at Carnegie Hall. Replied, understood, 1 word, that's all they got. That was the moment I pivoted from loyal VP to silent reckoning. Hey, before I go further, can I ask one thing? I know 95% of you listen to these stories without hitting that little subscribe button. Totally get it. But if you've ever wanted to see what happens when a smug CEO gets financially pantsed in front of a boardroom full of investors, tap that like, hit subscribe. It really helps the team keep these stories rolling. Anyway, that word, understood, wasn't just my reply. It was my activation key, because what Tyler and his overtitled C-suite snack pack didn't know was that I had been preparing for this day for months. Not out of paranoia, out of pattern recognition. It started small, Tyler skipping one-on-ones. CMO suddenly getting card access to confidential spend categories. COO authorizing vendor contracts without my countersignature. Then came the late-night Slack from the investor rep asking if our burn rate was accurate, because someone had presented a version of the books that didn't match their internal numbers. So I did what any woman in corporate finance, who's watched 3 regimes implode, does. I built the safety net before the fall. 3 weeks before this glorious text message, I added a clause to the Series C wire that required full board attendance and signature verification on the final disbursement. Just a tiny conditional gate, buried in the compliance node of our spend platform, nestled under emergency protocol triggers. I called it Clause 7.2D. Sounded boring enough to avoid suspicion, ironclad enough to stop $30 million cold. I also routed every executive expense through a control flow that required passive acknowledgement from my office. Passive, meaning we could approve or freeze without alerting the user. I let a few wild purchases through for flavor. A $2,700 dinner in Vegas, strategic conference at a spa resort, and someone ordering custom logo sneakers for brand synergy. And of course, I kept receipts, literal and metaphorical. I didn't need to make a scene when I got that message. I didn't need to send an all-staff blast or storm into the boardroom waving spreadsheets. I just needed to wait, because the next step wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical. That morning, I opened the financial dashboard, clicked on the Series C wire transfer, and hit pause transfer clause triggered. Just like that, $30 million froze midstream like it had stage fright. The wire note now read, pending full board ratification 7.2D compliance hold. No alarms, no fireworks, but over at headquarters, someone's Uber was about to get declined. And that would be the first domino. 3 months earlier, Tyler cornered me in the break room with the same finesse he used to microwave fish in a communal space. He slapped a printout of the Series C funding schedule on the table like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Can we push this transfer through faster?" he asked, grinning like he'd discovered espresso for the first time. "We've got momentum. Investors are hot. I want it moving by Monday." Translation: he was already spending the money. Probably told his wife they were getting a second vacation home, maybe one shaped like a yacht. I kept my tone neutral. "We still need the final board signatures." He waved it off. "Just paperwork, formality. You know how this works." I nodded slowly, like someone listening to a toddler explain rocket science. "Sure," I said, "just paperwork." That night, I stayed in the office late, not out of obedience, out of pattern recognition. See, Tyler had a habit of using urgency as a substitute for governance. When things were going his way, He was all manic charm and charisma. When they weren't, he turned into a human error message, loud, repetitive, and unhelpful. The Series C money wasn't just a windfall, it was a leash, and he wanted it long and loose. I wasn't going to be the idiot who handed him $30 million and hoped for the best, so I got surgical. Deep in our internal spend platform, under a compliance layer most of the execs didn't even know existed, I added a conditional gate to the funding disbursement. Clause 7.2d. It sounded bureaucratic enough to be ignored, but what it really did was lock the funds until every board member physically signed off, with verified attendance logged via two-factor confirmation. No attendance, no money. Then I rewired our internal spending policies. Quietly, strategically, every corporate card transaction, vendor invoice, and fleet vehicle expense would now flow through my compliance node. Not for approval, just for visibility. Like leaving a nanny cam in a room you know is going to get messy. And boy, did it. It started with the CMO borrowing funds from the discretionary budget to host a client engagement event at a rooftop tequila bar in Scottsdale. Then our new VP of Ops, handpicked from Tyler's fraternity buddy pool, racked up 3 separate bills at luxury car rentals in one weekend. Said it was for competitive benchmarking. Even Tyler's card started singing. First-class flights, hotel spa packages, a $900 steak dinner labeled outreach. Outreach to what, Wagyu cows? I didn't raise a flag. Not yet. That's not how this game works. Instead, I had my assistant start tagging anything over $500 that smelled funny, massage add-ons, room upgrades, even an Amazon order for a $1,200 ergonomic meditation chair charged during a company retreat. She flagged them in a folder titled For Later. I renamed the folder Christmas. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was reconnaissance. Because when a house catches fire, it's not the match that matters, it's how dry the wood already was. And ours? Bone dry. Tyler strutted around calling himself visionary and planning launch parties for products that hadn't cleared compliance. I was quietly building the tripwire system. Every dollar spent without backup would log against their personal ledger. Every irregular approval got timestamped and shadow copied, and all of it accessible only by me. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it because I'd seen what happened the last time a CEO thought rules were optional. One ended with subpoenas, 2 interns crying in HR, and a write-off we had to label experimental R&D loss to get through audit. So no, I wasn't going to let Tyler blow up another round of funding on swagger and soundbites, not on my watch. By the end of that quarter, the system was humming. Every expense had a pulse. Every transaction had a footprint. And me, I had the only map. All I had to do was wait. And on the day I got that text, grow up, didn't get angry. I got ready. The next morning, before the sun had the decency to rise over the parking lot outside my office window, I was already at my desk with a cup of gas station coffee that tasted like regret and reheated ambition. It was 6:30 a.m. sharp when I pulled up the fund's dashboard. The Series C wire, $30 million ready to launch, sat in its queue like a loaded gun with a trembling finger on the trigger. I clicked Hold Transfer. Reason, Clause 7.2d, pending full board attendance and signature verification. Instantly, the fund's status changed from initiated to under review. Just like that, the money stopped breathing. Next stop, the expense control panel. I pulled up the master ledger of all active corporate cards and fleet authorizations, then ran a filter, exclude payroll-tied accounts. That left 23 cards, every one of them tied to C-suite and strategic partners who thought corporate policy was more of a buffet than a contract. I selected them all. Deactivate. No warning, no notification, no mercy. By 6:34 a.m., a digital hammer had dropped, unseen, silent, surgical. I sat back, sipped my tar-flavored coffee, and waited. At 7:11 a.m., I got my first ping, an automated fraud alert. Transaction declined lift. $64.78 card. Tyler G., poor guy. Must have called a ride from the golf course condo back to HQ. Maybe thought he'd roll in fresh off his victory lap and charm his way into another round of funding. At 7:16 a.m., a new alert. Transaction declined United Airlines check-in coup. Darren L. Guess who was flying to negotiate with an international partner that just happened to be based in Cancun? At 7:32 a.m., the CMO's hotel confirmation bounced. Payment method, invalid deposit, Failed Resort Del Sol. I imagined her standing at the front desk, dripping with pool water and entitlement, as the concierge informed her that her executive platinum room was no longer on the reservation. I hoped she enjoyed the economy view of her career crumbling. Meanwhile, inside the company Slack, whispers started popping up in back channels. Anyone else getting weird payment errors? Did finance freeze reimbursements? My card just got declined at the gas station. Lol, what is happening? Oh, honey, it's not happening. It's already happened. I didn't respond. Not yet. That's the trick. You don't fight a fire alarm, you let it ring. To the outside world, looked like a glitch. Some back-end hiccup. Maybe a vendor API issue. That's what made it perfect. Everyone assumes chaos is random. Nobody suspects it's been choreographed. That morning, I kept my calendar blocked as finance ops sync, but all I did was sip my coffee and watch the alerts roll in like digital breadcrumbs of panic. Every declined transaction was a little slap from the system I built. Not $1 could be moved without my say-so. Not one tank of gas. Not one stale croissant from a Delta lounge. Nothing, and Tyler, he still hadn't texted. By 9:15, I knew he was aware. Probably pacing in his office, shirt untucked, swearing at his phone while his assistant Googled what to do when your corporate card stops working. I pictured him refreshing the finance dashboard with the desperation of a guy trying to revive a failed crypto wallet. But here's the kicker. He still thought he was in control, because nobody had told him yet that the money was frozen. Nobody knew I'd paused the wire. Nobody but me understood what Clause 7.2d actually meant. It wasn't a policy. It was a pin pulled from a very expensive grenade. And I was the only one who knew where it landed. So I stayed quiet, kept the cameras rolling. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. Because the beauty of administrative indifference looks like incompetence, right up until it ruins your weekend. At 10:06 a.m., Tyler burst into the hallway outside HR like a man whose Wi-Fi had just cut out during a TED talk he was giving to himself in the mirror. His face was a beautiful cocktail of confusion, ego bruising, and sweat. "My car's gone," he said, voice sharp and shaking. "The Tesla. It's not in the garage. Someone call security." The HR rep blinked. "You mean your company vehicle?" "Yes, my Tesla," he barked, like yelling would reverse the fact that he hadn't checked his email or his entitlement before parking it the night before in his reserved spot labeled CEO. In truth, the car wasn't stolen, not even missing. It was precisely where I told it to go, back to fleet control, courtesy of a scheduled pickup, initiated at 5:12 a.m. under the line item terminated authorization vehicle 3427B. See, that Tesla wasn't his. It belonged to the company. And according to the fleet policy that he signed off on 6 months ago, after I rewrote it, any vehicle not tied to a valid and active executive profile was to be automatically reclaimed within 24 hours of authorization lapse, as whose executive profile had been temporarily suspended pending compliance review. Guess who suspended it? Legal was looking into it, but what they didn't realize was that the digital paper trail they were following was the one I built. Every clause, every timestamp, every backdoor control setting disguised as a quarterly update. Even the vehicle reclamation trigger was buried inside a policy packet we renamed Transportation Efficiency Protocol. The signature at the bottom of the activation memo, Tyler's. Grim satisfaction doesn't even begin to cover it. Watching that smug golden boy realize he couldn't Uber to his own meeting, couldn't fly out on the company dime, and now couldn't even drive his pre-leased Flex Mobile. It was like watching someone try to put out a fire with cologne. HR, of course, was in shambles. Department head pinged me 3 times in 10 minutes. Did we repo the CEO's car? Followed by, is that legal? And finally, should we call legal? I answered none of them, because I knew what was coming next. At 10:33 a.m., I got a discreet knock on my office door. It was Jordan, one of the junior finance analysts who still referred to spreadsheets as grids. He looked pale, like someone had made him drink decaf by accident. His hand was a manila envelope. No words, just a handoff from the archive drawer. "You told me to deliver this if, all this started happening." I took the envelope gently like it was a relic. Inside, a printout of an email chain, 4 signatures, timestamped approval from 3 board members and legal counsel. The memo was dated 4 months ago. Subject: conditional executive suspension and asset lock escrow-linked controls authorization. That memo, it wasn't just a receipt. It was the legal skeleton key to every move I'd made since 6:30 a.m. The fleet recall, the card deactivations, the funding freeze, all of it pre-approved. I smiled without showing teeth. Thanks, Jordan, this is perfect. He nodded, then hesitated. Are we at war? No, I said. War's messy. This is just enforcement. By noon, legal had requested a meeting. I declined, citing schedule conflict due to ongoing compliance tasks. By 1 p.m., a frantic Tyler was demanding HR write someone up for impounding his car. HR, now completely feral, was consulting the same handbook he had ignored for years, only to discover, to their horror, that I had written that too. Everything he touched now answered to a system that no longer recognized him. And in the background, unnoticed by most, automated audit logs continued their quiet work, flagging, recording, filing. One document at a time. This wasn't chaos, this was choreography, and I had been leading the dance since the first note. By 2:12 p.m., my phone started ringing like it owed someone money. First, it was Tyler's assistant, texting, calling, even Slack D-Ming like a digital carrier pigeon in heat. Then it was Tyler himself, 2 missed calls, then 5, then 8. Let each one die in silence, watching his name flash on my screen like a fire alarm in a locked building. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened the folder labeled Investor Communications Emergency Contingency and attached a document that had been sitting there for precisely this kind of circus. Investor Funding Packet Series C, Trigger Protocol Activated. I addressed it to General Counsel of our lead funding firm, Brixmore Capital. In the body of the email, I wrote just one sentence. Section 3, Trigger is active. Board was not present. Then I hit send. That sentence was more than an FYI, it was a nuke disguised as a post-it note. See, Section 3 wasn't just a policy. It was a conditional lock inserted into our funding protocol that stated, in corporatis, any major funding transfer requires physical presence and acknowledgement of all designated transition officers at the final board meeting. In plain English, no board, no bodies, no bucks. And who decided what qualified as a transition officer? That would be me. Tyler, of course, had assumed, wrongly, that showing up on Slack like some discount tech prophet and dropping a passive-aggressive grenade was enough to move $30 million. He didn't realize the board's absence that morning wasn't just disrespectful, it was disqualifying. They'd violated protocol, and per the structure he'd authorized, because I'd buried it inside a routine capital restructure memo months ago, that meant the wire was dead in the water. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was compression. Pressure building beneath the surface, waiting for the crack. At 2:47 p.m., I received an internal email from legal. Urgent. Please advise investors requesting clarification on clause execution. I replied, all triggers are in accordance with the latest board-approved policies. See Section 3, control logs attached. No emotion, no embellishment, just protocol. That's what made it so lethal. By 3:10 p.m., word had spread through the executive floor. I watched from my office window as Tyler stormed past HR, own clutched to his ear like it was a lifeline. His face was flushed, teeth grinding, the kind of panic only CEOs feel when they realize the steering wheel isn't connected to the tires anymore. He shouted something about insubordination and sabotage, but I wasn't worried. The audit trail was clear. Every action I'd taken had been logged, approved, time-stamped, and codified by systems he never bothered to understand. Because Tyler didn't read documents, presented them. He loved slides, hated contracts. He loved vision boards, hated clause language. He once asked me if a compliance clause could be massaged. I told him sure, right after you massage a judge. Now he was pacing like a caged influencer, trying to figure out why no one would just fix it. What he couldn't grasp was that this wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. The best part? No alarms. No sirens, just a quiet little line in the wire dashboard that now read, Funding paused Section 3 protocol active, pending physical presence verification, and who manages the verification logs, take a wild guess. By 4 p.m., my calendar was full, not with chaos, but with control, compliance check-ins, internal policy reviews, cross-team data validations, all real, all important, all unmovable. So when Tyler's assistant sent me a final message, needs to speak with you immediately, I replied simply, currently unavailable. Compliance tasks in progress. Please refer to Protocol Doc 14.3b, and that was it. The great CEO meltdown had begun, not with a bang, but with 100 little denials. No card, no car, no funding, no answers, only silence. The kind that wraps around power like a noose, woven from every unchecked box and unread memo he ignored while chasing headlines. And me? I just kept working. The storm wasn't mine, it was his. By the time I left for the night, my inbox looked like a funeral guest book, formal names, quiet panic. Subject lines like following up on recent activity, clarification requested, and my personal favorite, unexpected trigger, behavior need insights. Last one came from a senior partner at Brixmore Capital, the kind of man who normally spoke in golf metaphors and 5-year projections. Now he was begging for clarity in real time. I didn't answer right away. That's the luxury of protocol. When you're covered, you get to breathe. At 6:04 p.m., my voicemail pinged with a message. I played it once, then again, slower. Amanda, is this your resignation or a warning shot? That was Carter Fielding, one of the early investor reps. He didn't waste words, didn't like drama. If he was calling instead of texting, it meant the investors weren't just nervous, they were circling. And if they were circling, the board would be next. I walked to the kitchenette, poured myself the last of the breakroom coffee, lukewarm, probably brewed by regret itself, and texted him back one line, neither, just following policy. Let them interpret that however they wanted. I wasn't bluffing, I was documenting. Meanwhile, across town, Tyler's unraveling continued. At 6:22 p.m., I received an email notification from the expense tracker we use for mileage reimbursements. Yes, the same one Tyler once called that boring app for people who don't lead. The system had flagged a manual gas receipt submission, $84.90 from a Shell station off I-70, filed under personal to be reimbursed, with his own debit card. Know what that meant? His corporate card was still dead, and now so was his dignity. I almost felt bad, almost. That same minute I got a second alert, an iMessage sent to the old finance iPad still logged in under our master device list. It was from Tyler's wife. Did your card get declined again? No emojis, no hearts, just that one line. I didn't even have to read between it. She already had. Back at HQ, I started packing, not because I was being forced out, but because I knew when the music stopped, I'd already be in another room. I pulled down my old certifications from the wall, wrapped my framed audit commendation in a towel, and carefully stacked 3 binders of internal controls into a box labeled Q4 Archive. I wasn't in a rush. I wasn't scrambling. This wasn't an evacuation. It was extraction. Each movement was calculated, one step closer to detachment, not departure, because I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Before I turned off the lights, I opened my desk's bottom drawer, the one with the fingerprint lock that even IT didn't know existed. Inside was a single folder. Interim Entity Proposal Confidential. Stamped, notarized, dated. The draft charter of a spin-off organization, funded independently, structured legally, already conditionally greenlit by 3 external board members during a private dinner 6 weeks ago. They called it insurance. I called it inevitability. I placed it gently into the drawer again and locked it. Then, just for good measure, I slipped my master admin keycard into my wallet, not because I'd need it, but because he might try to. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty. I walked past the CEO's Tesla's empty spot, still labeled with his title, and smiled. Tomorrow, the building would still be standing, but the kingdom inside, already mine, just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Tuesday morning hit like a car alarm with no off switch. At 7:03 a.m., Tyler called an all-hands exec sync, his usual code for a finger-pointing parade disguised as leadership. The invite subject line, Emergency Session Finance, Review plus Damage Control, scheduled it for 7:30 a.m., because nothing says panic like summoning your executive team before the caffeine hits. By 7:25, the text started rolling in. Hey, Zoom won't launch, getting a permissions error. Tried joining from my phone, blocked. Are we using a new link? Guys, I can't even get into the boardroom. My badge won't scan. Turns out when you revoke a dozen access credentials and reassign system admin roles over the weekend, doesn't just impact expense reports. It bricks everything. Zoom logins, badge readers, conference room /V access. I triggered it all Sunday evening, quietly, pre-scheduled. Just another routine access review set to execute on Tuesday morning per quarterly policy. all above board, all documented. So at 7:31 a.m., while Tyler stood in conference room B, alone, confused, and screaming into a dead camera, I was sipping espresso in my kitchen, bathrobe on, watching the circus unfold via audit trail notifications on my phone like live scoring at the Super Bowl. One by one, the execs tried to join the call. One by one, they were denied. The CTO tried badging into the West Wing, rejected, tried the stairs, blocked. Eventually ended up texting the facilities manager, "WTF is happening? Are we under lockdown?" "No, Chris, you're under policy." Meanwhile, Tyler, assuming this was just an IT hiccup, started pacing and yelling. Unfortunately for him, the internal mic system in that room was still synced to the archival logs. So now I had a timestamped audio clip of our CEO shouting, "This is Amanda's doing. Get legal on the phone. She's sabotaging us. She's always headed out for me. Always headed out for him. Please." I'd kept that company breathing through 2 compliance audits, an embezzlement scare, the great Q2 invoice apocalypse. I was the reason he hadn't been fired 3 CFOs ago, but he never noticed the infrastructure, just the obstacles to his chaos. The boardroom, of course, stayed empty. The board wasn't even invited to the call. Tyler had assumed they were irrelevant now that funding had paused. What he didn't understand was they weren't absent. They were watching. 2 had already messaged me privately for access to the backup logs. 8:12 a.m., I sent over the file bundle labeled Executive Access Log Last 30 Days Exceptions highlighted. Every override, every declined expense, every security trigger Tyler had ignored, it was all there. And every action I had taken, logged, verified, policy-backed. When the general counsel finally entered the fray, he looked at Tyler and asked quietly, "Has Amanda breached any internal regulations?" Tyler stammered, sweating through his overpriced blazer. "She's weaponizing bureaucracy." GC blinked, so she followed the rules too hard. Silence, the real kind. The kind that makes your own breath sound accusatory. They didn't know yet about the interim entity proposal in my drawer, or the 3 investor reps who'd already texted me some variation of, "When can we talk?" They didn't know about the backup authorization chain, or the asset recovery clause sitting quietly in the fleet management database. All they knew was that the doors were locked, the Zoom was dead, and the woman they underestimated had just made their entire ecosystem uninhabitable, with nothing more than a clipboard and a calendar. No shouting, no mess, just enforcement. And from where I was sitting, it was beautiful. The boardroom looked different when Tyler wasn't in it. No dramatics. No ego air freshener clouding the oxygen. Just tension, cold, pure, and pressurized, like a sealed lab before a controlled detonation. It was 9:00 a.m. sharp when the doors closed behind me. Not a minute early, not a second late. I walked in with 1 folder, 1 laptop, and 1 witness, Carter Fielding, the Brixmore investor rep who'd spent the past 48 hours watching our company unravel from the inside out, courtesy of his most compliant asset, me. Tyler hadn't been invited. Not accidentally. Deliberately. The board chair, Meredith Lang, opened with a calm that only billionaires perfect. "Let's proceed." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just clicked open my audit portal and shared my screen. First slide, Clause Violations Executive Conduct Log Series C period. Line by line, we walked through the unauthorized card transactions, the triggered compliance holds, the formal absence of quorum for the funding vote. Second slide, Section 3 Trigger Activation Legal Binding Authority Compliance Chain Approval. Stamped, dated, pre-approved. Third slide, CEO Irregularities Misuse of Funds Summary. Itemized, annotated, redacted where required, but damning enough in context to suggest deliberate negligence. Carter never said a word. He just nodded at each section like someone confirming what they'd already suspected, just waiting for the receipts. The board didn't argue, didn't push back. This wasn't a court. It was triage. Meredith leaned forward, hands clasped. "So what now?" That was my cue. I slid a printed letter across the table, signed in ink so fresh it still smelled like a reckoning. "This is my formal notice of withdrawal from my role as VP of Finance, effective immediately." Heads turned. 1 board member whispered, "Wait, what?" I continued, voice level. "This exit is not contingent on any retention negotiation. I've completed all required handoffs, all accounts reconciled, all protocols cleared." Meredith frowned slightly. "Why bring this to us directly?" I pulled a second document from my folder, a clean 1 sheet, bound with a silver clip, because I'm not just exiting. I placed the sheet face up in front of them. I'm evolving. At the top, bold proposal interim spin-off entity. Formation and leadership structure below that. Founder and chair, Amanda Everett Capital, $30M, confirmed commit from Brixmore Capital and Allied Series stakeholders. A beat of silence followed. Carter finally spoke, eyes on Meredith. The capital has been redirected to the spin-off, contingent on this board's recognition of the entity's independence. Meredith glanced around the room. No arguments, no protests, just that slow corporate exhale that sounds like capitulation cloaked in curiosity. So she said, "What's your ask?" I didn't blink. Full release from non-compete and IP entanglements. In exchange, I leave all internal infrastructure intact. No data scraped, no systems cloned. Just clean exit, clean start. Another pause, the kind that tastes like shifting power. Anything else? One more thing, I said, sliding one final envelope across the table. This is the interim staffing list. I'll be hiring from my existing team, including 5 from finance, 3 from ops, and 1 from legal. Carter glanced inside. His brow lifted. "You're taking Connor?" He asked to come with me. The board huddled for less than 3 minutes. When they returned, Meredith nodded once. "We accept the terms. Thank you for your foresight." I stood, gathered my folder, closed my laptop. No applause, no gold watch, no farewell cake with my face in frosting. Just signatures, legal nods, and the silent agreement that they would never underestimate an infrastructure operator again. I walked out with my spine straighter than it had been in years, because I hadn't just survived the collapse. I had architected what came next. The next morning, Tyler tried to log in. The blue login screen blinked once, then spat out a cold message in corporate font. "Access denied. User not recognized." He frowned, tried again, slower this time. Caps lock off. Password reset, same result. He pulled out his phone and attempted to use the biometric login for his dashboard. The app kicked him out, then forced a 2-factor code, which never arrived. He opened his laptop and plugged into the company VPN, one last Hail Mary. Denied. The system didn't recognize him anymore. At 8:19 a.m., marched into HQ and swiped his badge at the glass doors. Red light, beep, no entry. He tried again, harder, like force would earn back privilege. Red light, beep. The security guard, once too afraid to make eye contact with him, looked up and asked gently, "Sir, do you have an updated access credential?" Tyler didn't answer. He was already dialing. Legal picked up on the second ring. "She locked me out," he hissed. "I need immediate reinstatement. Override whatever she did." There was a pause. Then the voice on the other end, dry as a Nevada summer. "We can't act without her signature." He hung up so hard the screen cracked. And somewhere, just across the river, same city, different skyline, I was sitting in a sunlit office that still smelled like new carpet and ambition. No framed logo on the wall yet. Just a metal plate on the door. Dovetail Strategies, Suite 803. The first client sat across from me, contract open, pen in hand. I signed first. Clean, deliberate. Ink bled into paper like closure finally arriving. My laptop pinged with an auto-notification from the asset transfer system. Transfer complete, entity Dovetail now recognized as independent. No ceremony, no parade, just sovereignty in its purest, quietest form. I looked out the window at the skyline. Somewhere in that jungle of glass and steel, Tyler was probably hunched in a coffee shop, refreshing his Chase app like it held answers, watching his card statement glitch, calling his assistant to ask why legal was ignoring him, wondering why the world didn't work like it used to. He'd see my name removed from the company site later that day. VP of Finance, Amanda Everett status, former employee. But what he couldn't see, was the infrastructure I'd carried with me. The policies I'd authored. The investor relationships I'd owned. People who asked where I was going and said, "If you're building something, save me a seat." Because revenge isn't loud. It's not a rant. It's not a slap. It's a document, a signature. A redirect notice that moves $30 million from his control to mine. Tyler didn't get ousted. He got orphaned. Left behind in a company that no longer needed him, couldn't fund him, and barely remembered his password. And me? I walked into Chapter 1 without a grudge. Just a pen. And the knowledge that when the system fails you, you don't burn it down. You replace it. Quietly, completely, permanently. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.